So here we are on chapter 4 of the laws of kings and their wars from Maimonides. The king is granted license to levy taxes on the nation for his needs and for the purpose of war. He may also fix a duty on merchandise. It's forbidden to avoid paying this tax. The king has the right to decree that if someone does not pay these duties, his property will be seized and or he will be killed. These laws are derived from the book of Samuel, where it says, "You will be servants to him, the king." Previously in the book of Deuteronomy, it states there, "They shall be subjects to your levy, and they shall serve you." And so from this association, it's derived that the king may levy taxes and fix duties. The statutes that he establishes in these and related matters are accepted as law. For all the matters mentioned in the biblical passage concerning the kings are the rights to which the king is entitled. He may also send throughout the territory, this is halacha number 2, law number 2, he may also send throughout the territory of Eretz Yisrael and take from the nation valiant men and men of war and employ them as his soldiers for his chariots and his cavalry. He may similarly appoint them as his bodyguard and as footmen to run before him. As it says in the book of Samuel, he shall place them among his charioteers and his horsemen, and they shall run before his chariot, as sort of as an honor guard. He may also take the choicest of men to be his servants and attendants. As it states, as we said before, he shall take your finest men to do his work. Halacha number 3. Similarly, the king may take all those that are necessary for him from the nation's craftsmen and employ them to do his work. He must pay their wages. He may also take all the beasts, the servants, and the maids that are necessary for his tasks, and he may pay their hire or their value. As stated, he will set them to plow his ground and to reap his harvest, to make instruments of war and gear for his chariots. And he will take your servants, your maids, your finest young men, and your donkeys to do his work. It's an interesting note here that in the phraseology of the Maimonides, when he's talking about taking the soldiers for his chariots and cavalry versus for craftsmen and servants, etc. The phraseology used by the Rambam in this halacha derives the idea that the king's soldiers are not paid wages, rather they were given room and board at the king's expense. Although later we find out that they're also potentially available to take some of the bounty from any conquests. So not necessarily wages, but there are other options there as well. Halacha number 4. Similar, he may take wives and concubines from the entire territory of Eretz Yisrael. Wives implies women who are married with the kesubah and kedushin. Concubines means that they were married without the kesubah and without the kedushin. With the act of yichud, being alone with the king, that in and of itself, the king acquires her and relations with her are permitted to him. A commoner, however, is forbidden to have a concubine. The only similar relationship is the union with a Hebrew maidservant after she has been designated by her master. So there's a similarity there. The king may appoint the concubines which he takes to his palace as cooks, bakers, perfumers, as it states that he shall take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. Number 5. The king may force those who fit to his service as officers, appointing them as leaders of thousands and leaders of 50s, as it is stated in the Torah that the place shall place them as leaders of thousands and leaders of 50s for himself. It's an interesting idea here that he may force them to be officers. Ideally, we don't look for positions of responsibility and authority. That is something which is, leadership is thrust upon us, and that's more of a proper way of going to becoming leaders in the military. Is when it's forced upon you. That kind of gets that balance between doing something for the ego effect versus doing something which is actually to serve. You serve at the king's command, at the king's behest, rather as opposed to when someone is seeking, for the office. As we've seen in politics, that those who seek the office are oftentimes not the most appropriate for the office. Halacha number 6. He may take fields, olive groves, and vineyards for his servants when they go to war, and allow them to commandeer these places if they have no source of food other than these. He must pay for what is taken. And this is what is stated, that he shall take from your good fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves, and give them to his servants. And in a sense, fields is oftentimes the granary, vineyards is for the wine, and olives is for the oil. These are, primarily needs for taking care of the nutritional needs of the soldiers. Halacha number 7. He is entitled to 1/10 of the produce of the seed and the orchards and the newborn beasts, as it says that he will take 1/10 of your seed and your vineyards, and he shall take 1/10 of your sheep. So the idea here is that these are all different forms of taxes that the king can put upon the nation in order to be able to run the kingdom. So whether that's the people for staffing, or whether that's the food and drink needs, or taxes just for money to be able to pay for all the things he needs. Now, up until now, we've been talking about the king, and that's the normal situations where there's a king over the land of Israel. Now we're going to step into the Messianic King, in the times of Mashiach, in the times of Messiah, when Israel is taking over not only all the land, but actually being a tremendous light unto the nations. The Messianic King, he may take a 13th portion of all the lands conquered by Israel, and he may take that 13th portion as his own. And this will be an allotment for him and for his descendants forever. Halacha number 9. The property of all those executed by the king belong to the king. And similarly, all the treasures belonging to the kings of the kingdom which he conquers, they become the property of the king. The idea is, if it belonged to the king of that kingdom, it now belongs to the king of our kingdom. In regards to other spoils which are taken, the soldiers may take spoils, and afterwards they must bring it to the king. He is entitled to half of the spoils, which he takes the first portion of the spoils. The second half of the spoils is divided between the combatant soldiers and the people who remain in the camp to guard the baggage. An equal division is made between them. And we look back at the book of Samuel, where it says, a portion of those who go down to battle will be as the portion of those who stay with the cash, the baggage. And they shall be divided equally. And we actually kind of see this. We go back, there's examples of this in a number of different places, but including back when Abraham goes forth to war, and that which he takes and that which he gives to others is also an example of here. You also see this in the idea of King David's wars with Amalek. These are all examples that bring about this idea of the spoils of war. Number 10. All the lands that a king conquers belong to him. He may apportion them to his servants and soldiers as he desires, and he keep the remainder for himself. In all these matters, the judgment he makes is binding. In all matters, the king's deeds shall be for the sake of heaven. His purpose, the king's purpose, and the king's intent shall be to elevate the true faith and fill the world with justice, destroying the power of the wicked and waging the wars for God. The purpose of appointing a king is only to execute justice and wage wars, as it says in the book of Samuel. Our king shall judge us, go out before us, and wage our wars. So again, we go back to the idea that the kings of England, they go back to the idea that the kings of Israel are established by divine decree, by divine right, and their responsibility is not like the kings of other countries, but the responsibility of the kings of Israel is to, again, be a light unto the nations and establish peace throughout the world, and that's a divine peace, and therefore they're on a divine mission, and that's where all the basis of all this comes back to. That's it for today. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye now.